Something I always tell people when I talk about my beat, which is climate tech, is that I love writing about climate tech because it's focused on solutions. And here I'm sitting on the stage with 3 people who are working on solutions confronting climate change right now. And you guys are sitting in kind of all different parts of the climate tech ecosystem. We got 2 investors, 1 founder, and I'm really excited for this conversation because I think we're going to dig into a lot here. I think, Julie, let's start with you because I'm always really curious about people's climate action origin stories and how they get into what they do. And you have an interesting one because you started as an ocean scientist. So I'm just curious, like, what compelled you to move from that and into venture capital and help found Propeller?
Yeah, it's not an obvious connection, but for me it was really just a thread that ran across my my life, which has been the oceans. And it was a very particular period of my life. I had been a professor as a climate scientist, an earth system scientist, and I was on sabbatical in the Philippines as a Fulbright visiting professor. So I was studying how the ocean and atmosphere communicate with each other, sometimes in a whisper and sometimes in a roar when you get these ferocious winds that stir up the ocean. And my field site kept on getting inundated by typhoons, ever-increasing typhoon damage. And it wasn't just the damage to the villages in my field site, but it was the damage that climate change was causing to the people. I taught graduate students tropical meteorology at the University of the Philippines, and these students were vastly affected by climate change. In fact, there was a survey that came out a couple years ago that said that of all the young people on the planet, the Philippines, the majority of them in this survey were extremely worried about climate change, and even a greater majority said it impacted their ability to function. Being in this country I came to love, and with people I came to love, and seeing already the climate impacts of the most climate impacted country on the planet, which the Philippines is, it changed me. I came back, I left academia, I went to help lead a startup in the climate risk space to deliver more granular information from our climate models to help inform about the climate perils that are coming our way on this planet. And I felt like the risks are mounting and there's more to be doing. And what we want to also be doing besides reducing emissions on our planet, which is the most important thing we can be doing, but is to expand the space of climate solutions. And the oceans is the seat of not just our climate stability, but the oceans are also have a vast potential to provide more in terms of carbon dioxide removal, to provide a lot in terms of more than 30% of emissions reductions associated with maritime transportation, associated with also the ability to develop offshore renewables centered in the ocean. So the blue economy is this incredible opportunity from an investment perspective. So we created Propeller in recognition of just that enormous opportunity. And we're very pleased to have partnerships with some of the leading ocean science institutions and to be working very closely at an early stage, pre-seed and seed, and investing in novel solutions, many of them coming out of the minds of scientists. There are 2 other scientists who are on the list with us, founders Julian and Alex of Banyu Carbon. So if you were out in the front lobby, you saw the magic that they're able to create in a beaker. To be able to draw down CO2 out of the oceans. Phenomenal if you have a chance to visit and talk to them. This is a company in our portfolio, and it's unlocking that science and innovation that is at the core of what we do, which I think is vital for where we find ourselves in the planet's trajectory right now.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like traditionally people viewed the ocean as a victim of climate change, and you're saying the ocean is actually a key way to unlock change and solutions instead.
And so many people are connected to it. Provide renewal for individuals to go to the ocean. Shie talked about nature and the connectivity that people feel with nature. So many people feel that towards the oceans and want to do all they can to protect and restore and revitalize the oceans. And this is such an important time for all of those activities.
Well, Tom, I want to turn to you since you're also an investor on the stage with us. You once told me something I thought was really interesting, which is that you love to invest in overlooked solutions and overlooked startups. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that and what is the best example of that out of your portfolio companies?
Well, there is, in venture capital, it's very common to like follow the herd, follow the fashion. And it drives up massive valuations and it makes it really expensive to play at all. And actually, a lot of this is related to diversity, equity, inclusion stuff as well, because there's the sensibility that when people are looking off the beaten path, then they're like helping people out because there's these underprivileged people and you're going to pull them up because you found them in the rough. In practice, that's the underpicked pile. And if you get the best from the underpicked pile, it's way better than anything you get from the overpicked pile. And it's actually that simple. Like if you actually want to succeed at this, you need to go to places where you're not going to be incredibly crowded in. Now, some of the ways that we differ is that it means that we end up backing a number of companies where it doesn't fit exactly the pattern match template that a lot of Silicon Valley goes for. So for example, in Silicon Valley, it's very normal to be like, oh, you got to meet this founder. They're so charismatic. They could sell ice to an Eskimo. And in our firm, we call that charisma distortion. Like it's actually
personality.
It's actually a negative, because if a person can convince you to believe something that's not true, that's actually a drag force on your diligence, right? It's just true. Sorry, guys. But you have amazingly charismatic founders like Adam Neumann. Anyway, so, and look, they repeated the mistake. It's the largest Andreessen bet ever, is to double down on Adam Neumann. Anyway, so that's how deeply ingrained craziness is. So if you can just step aside from craziness, the world is a lot more sane out of that overpicked pile.
So who out of your portfolio companies would you say?
That one's really simple. So like we backed this company, Ascend Elements, has the absolute best unit economics for lithium battery recycling on planet Earth, like 2 to 2.5 times better than Redwood Materials. And they can't actually get all the way through the process, so that's the whole thing. When we're getting into this bet, Redwood Materials is led by the former CTO of Tesla. It is absolutely the charismatic, inevitably they must win kind of feeling in the valley. In practice, we destroyed them. It was not even close. Like, technically, we miles ahead. We've now built the largest battery recycling plant in North America, which is also the headquarters of Redwood Materials. And just to give you the sense of the quote-unquote head start, when we got into Ascend Elements, $40 million valuation, Redwood Materials right at that moment valued over $3 billion. And we just blew by them. Wasn't close. Now, the difference in conventional wisdom, majorly overpicked pile, bid it up like crazy without the progress there, compared to Ascend Elements where, I don't know, the CEO was kind of like a middle manager in a big corporation. That's his vibe. It's like super not the entrepreneurial, like charge in and like win everything kind of vibe, but the dude delivers. So it's like, look, you execute, you deliver, you're working with scientists that have the best tech, we're going in.
So Ben, you're the lone founder on the stage here. Your company solves a very interesting problem within the climate space that I didn't realize until I started looking into you, Infinitum, what you do with motors, that was a problem space. So can you talk a little bit about what the problem is from a climate perspective traditional motors have and how what you guys are doing at Infinitum kind of solves for that?
Absolutely. And before I get started, I want to let everyone know that I have a stutter. If you're wondering what's going on up here, now you know. So as many of you maybe know, electric motors consume over half of global electricity annually. And the topology of an electric motor hasn't changed almost ever. And we have our cell phones that started out as a giant brick, and they've evolved into like a tiny compact item. And the device that consumes over half of global electricity annually hasn't changed at all. So Infinitum manufactures a smaller, lighter, quieter, and more efficient electric motor. And we are experiencing a lot of adoption in the data center segment, and primarily for cooling all the servers. And in 2023, we were deployed at a handful of data centers, and over that time, we were able to increase efficiency, decrease emissions on average of 20%. And only a half year after today, we're at roughly 20 campuses. We have experienced quite a lot of growth, and with that growth has enabled us to open up our second manufacturing facility in Mexico. I'll just add, if there's anyone out there that's ever interested in reducing your OPEX, increasing efficiency, I'm your guy.
And I think you've kind of stumbled upon a huge problem space right now within tech, and not just clean tech, but tech overall, which is data centers and their energy consumption emissions. What a time to be working on motors.
We got lucky.
Yeah. So Julie, something interesting that I found out about Propeller is that you guys have what you call an Ocean MBA program to help bring ideas from kind of the bench to pilot stage. And I feel like that's so often where really, really great innovators, scientists get stuck, is they have a great idea that works out in a lab setting, but translating that and forming that into a company is a different skill set. So what do you think is the formula for turning a successful idea into a successful company?
It's way more than just an idea, and it's often even, to recognize what's the science piece that has a thread that's actually technology, right? That can be deployed into the world and make a difference as a solution. So that connectivity to a solution and to what customers are willing to pay for is really what we help draw out in our cohorts of startups and scientists that we bring to our Ocean MBA. It's a really unique, very short, mini condensed MBA, which we call it. And really some of the most interesting discussions happen amongst the cohort themselves, and as they're teasing out really where the value in what they offer is and what their underlying product can be in the space. And we connect them with mentors. We have a really illustrious group of lecturers that come and talk about the nitty-gritty of being a startup founder, and often focused on the challenges that people will face. Tom was speaking about some of them, in terms of raising funds. And to just give a preview of what that life and that path is like, and to crucially, I think, make them feel part of a community of people who are solving in these spaces. I think we can often overlook with a lot of the dire news that's coming out about our planet these days, really the role that we all play, really incredibly vital role as solution finders in our own lives and in the ways that we are in the world. And so this is one way that we can shine a light on and help people to meet their potential in developing their own startups.
Yeah. And Ben, I feel like your startup has overcome perhaps an even greater hurdle that many climate tech startups don't even reach the scale. But, you raised a pretty successful Series E round, almost $200 million. Like you mentioned, you just completed your second facility in Mexico. That's a big deal. I think getting to commercial scale is a much harder hurdle, especially for these hardware-intensive, CapEx, OpEx-intensive projects that today's climate tech startups are. So what advice do you have for other startup founders out there who are trying to get over this valley of death and raise the kind of capital required to pull off this large of an endeavor?
I think it's not as much about the capital and more just about the customers. I know that's maybe an easy answer, although you need the customers that purchase the first time, and then you need them to purchase again, and again. I think, and you also need them to be purchasing at a profitable area, and if it's not profitable yet, it needs to have a clear path to profitability. I think it's a fairly easy answer. It's about the customers. Get the customers, get the revenue, you'll succeed. With the issues in the financial market over the last year, I think it's a hard one to tell the story of if I build a factory, it will come. You almost have to have the order in your hand, and then you'll get the factory.
Yeah. Tom, I'm curious your take on this because, I think so much of green tech, clean tech, there comes this perception that, every new technology that is renewable or better than the fossil fuel alternative is more expensive. There's a green premium. Do you think a clean tech startup can succeed with a green premium if it's more expensive than the fossil fuel? Okay, well, then, but isn't that the case for the majority of clean tech out there today?
Yes.
Say green hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, carbon capture, all of it.
Yes.
So what do we do? How are we supposed to compete against the landscape?
No, what Ben has just said is the right formula. So what you do is you find the tech that actually has better unit economics, and the bar that we're going for is not a premium, it's not even parity. The bar that we typically aim for, and we base it on the physics first principles of it, is whatever the margin is for your industry, we want to find the deep tech that'll crash the cost of production by more than 3x your margin. So if you have a 20% margin industry, we're going to crash the cost of production by 60%. If you have a 30% margin industry, we crash by 90%. The reason is that the industries that are doing the most damage to the planet already have an enormous install footprint. It's all brownfield, right? They maybe have 0 to 2% greenfield build in a year, which means when you think you're competing on parity, you're not. If you come in there with equivalent OpEx to the dirty, damaging tech of the past, but people have all this CapEx inertia, they won't move because of the CapEx inertia.
Yeah.
Because you're making them retire equipment that would last for 20 years. They're making them retire on year 6. And they don't want to write off those huge losses.
Well, that sounds too good to be true then. What are some examples of this?
Well, Ascend is one of them, and actually the entire portfolio. If you go to @oneventures.com, it's the whole portfolio, guys. And once you get that, it's exactly what Ben was saying. People want those unit economics so badly, they're rapacious for it. They will go and they will actually start ordering from you even before you can produce. And when you have the offtake agreements effectively as guaranteed revenue at the point of production, then all you really need to solve is a supply limit problem. When you have infinite demand and you just need to solve a supply limit problem, you can solve a supply limit problem with a debt level risk. And if you can solve that with the debt level risk and get an equity level return, that's how you win, basically. Equity level return typically comes with equity level risk. But if you find the deep tech that crashes that unit economic barrier by that much, you can execute and get to exits at equity level outcomes with debt level risk. And that's how you beat the whole market. Yay.
I'm afraid that's... It's a winning formula, but I'm afraid that's all the time we have. So thank you all.
This guy already did it. So just do what he did.
Thank you all so much.
Yes.